Hey everybody, I just finished up the build on my RC Powers F22 version 3. It's part of the new version 3 package that RC Powers just released a few weeks ago. So I thought I'd do a walk around video to discuss some of the build techniques and things that I found or discovered during the build and a few little mods that I made. So anyway, just real quick about the paint job. I went fairly simple. I used some dollar store acrylic paint. This is actually supposed to be called a fiery red, and it sort of more turned out like a, I don't think I'd be caught dead going to work wearing a shirt this color, but kind of color. But anyway, and this is supposed to be neon blue, but it's a bit lighter. Good news is should be really easy to track in the sky. I just used the templates for the canopy from the plans that are normally meant to be laid down on some tape, and I just sort of, drew out the line and painted this in with black. I think it has a really nice contrast to the rest of the plane. For finishing, I got away with absolutely no spackle on this plane whatsoever. All the filling of all the grooves is all scrap dollar store foam, just glued in there with a very thin bead of dollar store foam, and then sanded down. So I think that'll really help it. Not only does the lines look nice, it'll also, I think, help it be very, very aerodynamic. I built this entire plane with foam tack, except for maybe a little dab of hot glue here or there where I needed something to dry a little more quickly. My overall weight, including a 2200 nanotech battery, is about 705 grams, so about 25 ounces, which is, I think, pretty decent for a plane this size. I have the KF4 airfoils on here. I went with 4mm dollar store foam top and bottom for the airfoils. I'm using a total of 6 servos. They're all 9-gram plastic servos. So for control surfaces, which I'll show you moving later, I've got my elevators mixed or programmed as Elavons, independent ailerons, and what I did with the ailerons is I mechanically reduced those by 50% right off the bat by moving the control rod closer to the servo on the servo arm. I also have rudders, and for a motor I went with the Super Megajet version 2 from Grayson Hobby, which I think will give this help this plane scoot along pretty good at 25 ounces with that motor. I think she'll move along pretty good. And I'll show you where my other electronics are placed later on. So from a standpoint for the build, with the new V3, by looking through the instructions on this plane and others, you have a center, sort of a couple of bulkheads here, and a center spine piece, and then the nose is sort of all one piece except for this top piece, and it just sort of wraps around that bulkhead. You build the nose, the fuselage, and the belly plate go together. I followed the instructions fairly closely, just as a beta test thing. Those all go together in one piece, and then the wing plate is a separate piece. And then once you have that all together, you just jam everything together. So the wing plate is very standard for if you've built a park jet before. You cut it out. If I use the untiled plan, so my whole wing is actually one solid piece. There's no seam down the center, which is kind of nice. Install your carbon, put on your control surfaces. I actually used foam tack glue to make my hinges, so that'll keep it lighter. It looks nice and clean as well. So once you get that done, I always put my vertical stabilizers are the last thing that I put on my plane, just because I find it's a lot easier to move the plane around, because you're always flipping it, front to back or upside down, right side up when you're building the thing. So I put those on last. Okay, so the electronics bay here is huge. I put my receiver and my speed controller down below, which I'll show you a little bit later. One thing that's I went back and forth in a couple of PMs with Dave Powers. The center of gravity per the plans is basically right here on this brake at the front of the airfoil here, which is kind of the wing brake, I guess. And as I was building, normally there's actually a piece of foam that comes down sort of right here. You can follow my finger, and there's a bulkhead, I think right about here. to get this thing to balance, because it was insanely tail heavy, I ended up having to cut a hole. You may not be able to see it. Yeah, you can barely see it there. I had to cut a hole in that bulkhead to get my battery far enough forward to get it to anywhere near balance. And in fact, again, after some discussion with Dave Powers, my center of gravity that I'm using right now is actually about a ½ inch behind this wing brake. And it actually seems to balance pretty decently now, even slightly nose heavy, which I prefer. Otherwise, it was very tail heavy, and I'm really personally not a big fan of tail heavy planes. I'd rather fly them a little bit nose heavy, at least initially, till I can get it trimmed and play around with my battery position and everything else. So I'll just show you in the nose, in order to get as much weight forward as I could. Hopefully you can see that. There's my speed controller. It's right at the very front of the intake, so it doesn't look terribly great, but the other advantage is I should not have any problems with cooling on my speed controller. And down the other intake, might not be able to see, my receiver taped down there, and there's my antenna taped up right near the front. My receiver is actually ahead of the center of gravity as well. And you can see those holes, the one hole there just above my receiver, those are in the plans too, and that's a really smart idea because it allows for a lot of cooling to go back through the electronics bay and back to the motor. Now, because of where my battery is, I don't know, I may have to cut some vents if it ends up staying there to help get some airflow over my battery, but again, we won't know that till we start flying it. So anyway, that's kind of the electronics stuff. While we're on the top here, I'll just talk about these servos. On the plans, the servos for the rudders in the plan view, they sort of lay on their sides, and then you run your push rod back. All my push rods are 2mm carbon rod with these little clevises that I got from Hobby King, just foam tacked on, and then I just use these little quick easy connect to connect them onto the servo. I find that I've used those, you may have seen I've used those on a couple of other planes that I've built recently. I find they're really strong and really light, so I'm liking those for sure, because it's over the what is it, 256 threaded Dubro rods, which are great. I really like them normally, but these push rods are much lighter, probably about half the weight, so that's helped me reduce the weight quite a bit. So I'm just going to flip it over here and show you a modification that I made. A couple modifications actually. In the instructions, the pictures shows pictures when it talks about, you know, setting up your electronics bay and gluing your magnets and stuff on. And it's actually, the pictures are for one, I think, from a different plane in the V3 series. I don't know which one, but they inspired me. The pictures inspired me to put an electronics bay here in the bottom. As well, and I'm very glad that I did, because with my big fat hands trying to get in and adjust, it just made my life so much easier connecting up wires. Because you might be able to see there, in order to get my speed controller as far forward as it was, I had to run about 10 inches or more of speed control extension, which of course has added some more weight to my plane. These are my Elavon servos right here. So I've actually got them connected sort of in reverse. Normally I would have my clevis back on the control horn, but I put the clevis up here because I'm not going to be able to do a lot of adjustment in there. They run back, they go underneath your vertical stabs, come down through, and then they fold over, and then there's a tab on the other side here where they glue, keeps them nice and secure, and also gets them to the right angle for scale look. And then I've got my easy connector back here on my control horn, so sort of in reverse, but this makes it a lot easier to adjust. I did put extra reinforcements in the Elavons, just some carbon rod, and a little bit of foam tack glue, no tape, so keeps that nice and light, but I think hopefully we'll keep those nice and strong and prevent flex. And you've probably already seen I put them in the vertical stabs as well. So anyway, I would suggest, if you are going to build this plane, just make your life a little bit easier if you do put this this mod in here, and it's really nothing to do. You just kind of figure out how big you want it, and then you know, slap a couple magnets in here, and I just cut a bit of a groove right in here so I can run my wires across underneath to connect up to my receiver without causing any problems with the door. For the servos, this hole, this is actually the back of this Elavon servo, because as you saw, if you want to keep them internal to the plane, the servo obviously is on the inside. This is on the plans where the aileron servo would normally go, and I was a bit concerned as I was building it. I wanted to try and get as much weight as forward for the center of gravity. So this is where the aileron servo would go, and the Elavon servo was sort of around in the same area. So I ended up with my aileron servos further forward and Elavon servos here. What it also does is on the plan view, it showed the servos just sort of laying on their side and glued down without any real foam support. So this also gives the servo a nice strong reinforcement around it in addition to the glue. You can see this tape here. Probably maybe just the way I land, I'm not sure, but on all of these flat belly plate planes that I've built, F35 version 2, FRC Foamies F35, my F22 version 2, if you have a bit of a tail hit or hit hard on the tail, I've always found that the foam is going to crack right here. So I always now, when I build them, I just put on some tape here and reinforce it. And lots of times you don't have, even if you do crack it, you may never even know because the tape's going to hold it together. But again, that's just an E3 Scott build technique from lessons learned, probably caused by the way that I fly. So anyway, I'm just going to pause here, flip it over, and hook up my my power setup and show you how my control surfaces are moving. Okay, so here we are back again. I've got everything powered up. So again, I've got, there's the travel. Maybe easier to see on the side here. There's the travel on the elevators. On the plan view, it says to start off at 1.5 inches travel. So I measured it. That's 1.5 inches each way, so 3 inches total, which on my transmitter ends up being about 50% throws. So I got 50% throws programmed in there right now. And then I've got ailerons and elevons working together in the roll axis, and then rudders. I think I have the rudders at about, I don't know, 75% throw, and for right now I have 50% expo on everything. So we'll see how it goes. Dave Powers had mentioned something maybe about spoilerons. Might be something helpful if you get into slow speed and you start to you pop those on. It'll help stabilize the plane. But for now, I'm not going to mess around with any mixes other than the Elavons, and I'll just do my best not to get down into any slow speed trouble spots. But anyway, so I'm just going to disconnect. Pause here for a second. Disconnect my battery so I don't have any bench accidents. Alright folks, so there we have it. There's the RC Powers F22 version 3. Really it's a nice sleek looking plane. It's supposed to be the expert's park jet. Not that I'm an expert by any means, but I thought it's also not my first rodeo when it comes to park jets, so I thought I'd take the plunge. I'm hoping to get to Maidenhead in the next couple of days. Like I said, it's a really nice looking plane, and I'm hoping that this C of G situation here is going to work out just fine. I'm confident that it is, and if it doesn't, well, it's just foam. But looks great, and thanks very much for watching. If you have any questions, you can post them down below in the comments part of my YouTube channel, or if you're an RC Powers member, just put a post on the RC Powers F22 version 3 thread, and I'll do what I can to respond. Okay, so thanks very much again for watching, and take care.